Jim Russell had been a business consultant in Los Angeles, California, and had been dabbling with a new hobby since 1959. That year, 34-year-old Jim Russell was looking for something to do on a weekend when a friend introduced him to a novel new hobby called slot car racing. Russ, as everyone called him, was hooked. A visit to Hollywood Raceway, one of the nation's first commercial slot racing centers, inspired him and friend John Tyler, a hobby shop owner, to build a multi-lane routed track in his den. They used Strombecker cars, modified for high performance. It was an instant success in the neighborhood, and the need for better parts became obvious. The result of an accidental varnish spill over one of his scale car bodies resulted in the idea of producing a coating to protect these scale racers from scratches that resulted when intense racing was done. He called the product Ruskit and started marketing it in 1963. He subsequently founded Ruskit in the same year. The success of this product and his interest in the hobby led to the creation and marketing of other products related to the now booming model car racing hobby. His timing was impeccable. By 1963, the Wall Street Journal reported that the model car racing market was worth $100 million. By 1965, there were more commercial venues to go and race model cars than there were bowling alleys in the United States. Jim managed his company like an auto manufacturer. He sold a range of products from individual parts to complete cars. He had a race team comprised of 4 members: Mike Morrissey, who was the captain, Rick Durkee, Ron Quintana, and Len Vucci. Like a full-scale race team, they would travel across the country and compete against other hobbyists as a means of promoting products made by Ruskit. Jim Russell and Ruskit introduced many products to the market, perhaps none so famous as a standard controller format, the pistol grip, still used to this day, and has since migrated over to the standard in RC racing. In 1964, Phil Barchetta, who was Strombecker's PR man, started one of the first factory-sponsored teams that raced at various tracks in the greater Chicago area. The following year, Jim Russell and his Southern California hotshots, Mike Morrissey, Rick Durkee, Ron Quintana, and Len Vucci, participated. The racers had their expenses paid as well as any parts required to build and maintain their cars. Team Ruskit would go on a 30-day nationwide tour, which had a tremendous effect on the development of professional slot car racing in America. The first thing Team Ruskit discovered is that they were not as far ahead of everyone as they thought. As published in Car Model, February 1966, page 24, Mike Morrissey writes, "To begin with, everywhere we went, we were surprised at how fast cars are going. From Las Vegas to Long Island, we found cars almost as fast as ours, and in Detroit, well, I'll come to that later. Detroit was the home of the Groove Raceway, and things did not go exactly as planned," according to Morrissey. Team Ruskit, we didn't have much trouble going as fast as anyone else except in one place, the Groove. In Royal Oak, Michigan, it was here that we got clobbered, whipped, and obliterated. I mean, they could have saved themselves some time by simply beating us with hammers and throwing us out of the joint. You see, it was at the Groove that we learned all about super traction tracks, the hard way. We had heard about these Midwest track surfaces, but we had never realized just how sticky they were. They use a high-gloss paint that is nearly shiny. Then after the track is broken in and builds up a little tire goop on the paint surface, it becomes so sticky that you can't believe it. Team Ruskit, our cars are built for normal surfaces and are, as I said, very light. They wouldn't slide or drift at all, but instead would just do snap rolls. The locals' cars weigh 5 to 6 ounces or more. They use flat brass plate about an eighth thick for frames. Those elastic tires and a variety of motors. The flat plates give a very low center of gravity, which kills the flipping tendency, and the weight stabilizes them. To get all that mass down the straights, they use a hairy motors like Dino Chargers, Rams, and wildly rewound Pitmans and Mabuchis. To stop, they use up to 6 volts of power brakes. We'll be back that way, though, and next time we'll be properly armed. Maybe we could put up a decent fight. A year later, Team Ruskit returned, and that year they beat the locals at their own game. A sense of equilibrium had returned to the slot car racing scene. If you can imagine what it must have been like going up against a group of hired guns and factory blazers, no less. Jim Russell's membership in an exclusive club, MISAC, Miniature Electric Scale Automobile Club, that was located in a building in Inglewood, California, gave him a proving ground as well as the perfect setting to take photos to market his cars. The products Ruskit offered spanned a wide spectrum. Along with the motors, bodies, and chassis components were real-scale wow wheels and an LP of sounds and interviews from the Laguna Seca in 1966. Ruskit's financial success gave Jim the ability to sponsor full-scale racing cars. One of the first was an unofficial Porsche team comprised of two Carrera 6 racers driven by Ken Miles and Scooter Patrick, which won the CSPRRC and was shown on the cover of the Laguna Seca album. He also sponsored a Lola T70 driven by Ronnie Bucknam. This car is now owned and raced by ACD rocker Brian Johnson, restored in the original Ruskit colors and livery. But these cars, while special, would pale when compared to Jim's next purchase. At one of the races that year, Jim Russell was talking with Carroll Shelby, who mentioned that they were getting ready to crush the Cobra Daytona coupes that had been so successful in GT racing over the prior 2 years. Jim offered to buy the original coupe, chassis number CSX2287, that Craig Breedlove had used to break some speed records at Bonneville after the year's successful racing season, in which Shelby trounced the Ferrari GTO LMS. Biggest problem was to get all the salt out of the car, to use it for a promotional display at the West Coast races during the year. Shelby agreed and sold the car to Jim for $4,500. Strictly in the interest of saving money, you understand. Jim hit on the idea of converting the car to street legality, so it could be driven to the races instead of needing a trailer. This meant that Jim would have to make the ultimate sacrifice of driving the car on the street. Stepping into the breach, he steadied himself and drove the car back and forth to work many times while he had it. The sound of this 200-mile-per-hour supercar firing up in the driveway would bring kids out of the neighboring houses just to see it pass. Unfortunately, the slot car craze was waning, and the slot car shops that had outnumbered bowling alleys began to close. And by 1968, the market was in a full nosedive. The Daytona Coupe was sold in 1967 to Music Man Phil Spector, Wall of Sound, Righteous Brothers, Celebrity, Noted Gunman to meet payroll. Selling price $12,500. This very same car would go on to sell for $4.5 million years later. In 1969, Jim Russell closed Ruskit. He liquidated the assets and was able to pay off almost all of his debts. Charles Diker, vice president of Nabisco and president of Aurora Plastics Company, approached him and wanted Jim to work in New York and sell Aurora the patents on the Ruskit controller. This contract allowed Jim to pay off the Ruskit debt and set the stage for the creation and stunning growth of the AFX line of HO racing models. So, in 1969, Jim sold his slot car company to Aurora Plastics Company and moved to West Hempstead, New York. He accepted a position with Aurora Plastics Company to head the Hobby Crafts division. This segment of the business dealt with the hobby side of the HO scale slot cars that had become such a staple for the company. He hired a new team and proceeded to remake the product line, dramatically improving the design and performance of the cars. He also oversaw the renaming of the product range AFX in 1971. As a result of these changes, AFX grew dramatically over the next 5 years to about $45 million and became the clear market leader. In 1975, Jim left Aurora to start his own company in the hobbies and crafts market. In the meantime, AFX sales flattened in 1977, and the toy side of the business was very unprofitable. Aurora's owner, Nabisco, sold the company to a British toy conglomerate in that year. The new owners struggled, and the AFX brand ended up in the hands of Coleco and finally Tomy. In each case, the new owners would hire Jim to help with the product development and hobby sales would rise. So Jim was not only involved in the creation of the line, but was involved in its development nearly continuously. Jim was a paid consultant to Tomy for the AFX line after they bought Aurora in 1980 until the creation of Race Masters in 1998. Along the way and throughout the decades, Jim Russell did consulting and product development for other slot car companies like Tyco, Galoob, Ideal. He also formed 2 standalone companies in the industry. Jim Russell, a visionary in the world of slot cars, your contributions through Ruskit, AFX, and Race Masters have left an indelible mark on the racing enthusiasts' hearts. Your passion for innovation and dedication to the craft have fueled the excitement of countless racers. Here's to the legendary Jim Russell, whose influence continues to race through the lanes of slot car history.